All right, so that's a basic calculation of one. So just how many shares are outstanding for what portion of the year, you add all those up, and you get that. So this would be, if we were doing Douglas's complete earnings per share calculation, this would be what goes in the denominator of number of shares. But we have a twist. We have a twist. A twist is, what about a stock split or a stock dividend? All right, if you think about a stock split or a dividend, what happens? What happens is the number of shares increases, but nothing else really changes. All right. Now, we had a situation, several situations here in our first example, in brief exercise 1610, where the number of shares changed because we issued more shares or repurchased treasury or reissued. But in those cases, what's going to happen? If we're going to reissue more shares, we're going to get more cash as our equity increases, right? We're going to get new shares, we're going to issue new shares, we're going to get cash. So we're going to have more assets, and the earnings power of the company is going to increase because we have more cash to buy assets with and to invest in things. So that's not a problem for this, because if we have more equity, then the earnings should go up as well, and that effect should balance each other out. When we repurchase treasury shares, what happened? Equity goes down because our contra equity account is increased, and since we're spending cash to buy these shares, well, assets go down. So if both sides of our equation are being affected here, then our weighted average number of shares outstanding is really reflecting a change in the overall earnings power of the company. But what if we have a stock split or a dividend? These things aren't true. We'll have the number of shares increasing, but no change in assets, right? Assets equal liability plus equity. The dollar value of assets and the dollar value of equity stays the same. There's no changes, but number of shares will increase. So what that means is that the share that you held in January is not the same thing as a share that you held in December if there's been a split or a dividend, because the total size of the pizza, as it were, has not changed, but the number of shares over which that pizza has been cut into which the pizza has been cut, the number of shares has decreased. So your share is actually worth a smaller portion. So what we need to do with a stock split or a dividend is we need to restate all shares prior to the split or dividend to be equal to post-split or dividend shares. So if we have a 3-for-1 stock split, we have to take all those early shares and multiply them by 3, because those shares are really being increased to a higher number of shares, but there's no actual change. Or if there's a 10% stock dividend, we have to take those and multiply them by 1.1. All right, so if there's a stock split or a dividend, we have to restate all those shares. So we just multiply them by whatever the split factor or the dividend percentage is. So we multiply, again, a 10% stock dividend, multiply them by 1.1 to increase them by 10%. For a 3-to-1 stock split, multiplied by 3. Obviously, if there's a reverse stock split, if there's a 1-for-3 stock split, we divide them by 3. All right. If we have multiple splits or dividends, we have to restate multiple times. So everything before the second split has to get restated for the second split, or everything before the second stock dividend has to get restated for the second dividend. So if you have multiple splits or dividends, the earlier shares that existed at the beginning of the year will have to get restated multiple times. All right, so that's a twist, another twist that you have going on there. All right, and then we have one more twist that we're going to see. And this is, I'll call this a twist on the twists. If the split or dividend happens after year end, but before financial statements are issued, restate the shares recorded in the financial statements. So what does this mean? So this would mean, so if here's our year, so here's 2020, and here's 2021, and let's say we have a stock split or stock dividend in February of 2021. Well, we would need to, if these financial statements haven't been issued yet, we would need to restate all of 2020 for this split that happened after 2020 was over. Now, this is unusual. Normally, we don't have things in a different calendar year or a different fiscal year affecting things in the year that we're reporting. But in this case, we do want to do this. Now, why is this? A, because investments are forward-looking, and we want people to be able to compare earnings per share when they read the financial statements to the number of shares that exist as those financial statements are being issued. All right, so we don't want people to say, hey, you're going to be earning $10 a share in earnings when the shares have since doubled because of a 100% stock dividend, and now that $10 becomes $5, and it's a totally meaningless comparison. The other thing is we're going to issue in early 2022. We're going to issue the 2021 financial statements, and they're generally going to be comparative, right? Companies usually issue multiple years of statements together. And so you're going to be, in your 2021 financial statements, you're going to be comparing 2021 and 2020. And again, you want the earnings per share number to be comparable. So even though in 2020 that stock split had not happened, you would restate all future presentations of earnings per share so the number of shares is consistent. It doesn't mean you don't also record your changes in one, so for those years you do, but for the stock split or dividend, you want the sort of size of the shares to be consistent. All right, so that's the twist on the twist. So remember, we have the first twist is that you have to restate all shares prior to a stock split or dividend for that split or dividend. And the second twist is that you have to restate multiple times if you have multiple splits or dividends, and the twist on the twist is you restate those for future stock splits that happened before you issue the financial statements. All right, so now we are going to do another example, and that will be notes question number 6. And that will be exercise 1616. And so what I'm going to have you do is just do part A, determine the weighted average number of shares outstanding. And so this will have 2 twists in it. We've got a 10% stock dividend and a 3-for-1 stock split. So think about what we said. You're going to do this by having an additional column in your table. So in the prior table, we just had the dates, the shares outstanding, the fraction of the year, and the weighted shares. You're going to stick another column in here for the restatement. So that will help you keep track of the restatement. So that's the hint on how to do that. So let's take a look at exercise 1616. On January 1st, 2021, Wilkie Corp had 480,000 shares of common stock outstanding. During 2021, it had the following transactions that affected the common stock account. February 1st, we issued 120,000 more shares. March 1st, we had a 10% stock dividend. May 1st, we acquired 100,000 shares of treasury stock. June 1st, we issued a 3-for-1 stock split. And October 1st, we reissued 60,000 shares of treasury stock. So not all 100,000, but just 60,000. All right, so notice we have two of our twists in here. We've got a 10% stock dividend on March 1st. So everything before March 1st gets restated up by 10%, multiplied by 1.1. And on June 3rd, you've got a 3-for-1, or sorry, June 1st, you got a 3-for-1 stock split. Everything before that gets multiplied by 3. All right, so go ahead and do your best to come up with the weighted average number of shares outstanding. I'll give you a hint. It's the number, it's close to 2 million shares. It's between 1.5 million and 2 million shares. So if you're not between there, go back and try again. All right, I'll give you a countdown. You can pause. 3, 2, 1, pause. All right, so let's take a look at exercise 1616, part A. And we will do our table. We got the dates, got the shares outstanding, have your restatement, fraction of the year, and the weighted shares. All right, so let's go through our events. So from 1 until February 1, so that's 1/12. And again, obviously you can do these columns in any order you like, so you could put the fraction right next to the dates. It doesn't matter. You're multiplying in any order you want. But from the beginning of the year, we started with 480,000 shares outstanding. I'm going to leave the restatement column alone. The reason I'm going to do this is to make sure we're going to go back and do it all at the end to make sure we capture everything. So I'm not going to do my weighted shares until I put my restatement in. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave that at the end. I think it's easier to do that and kind of work your way backwards. So let's see. On February 1st, what happened? On 2/1, we issued 120,000 shares. So our number of shares outstanding goes up to 600,000. All right, and that lasts until March 1st. And so it's another 1/12. And then what happens on March 1st? On March 1st, we issued a 10% stock dividend. So what that means is we're going to take 10% of $600,000, or 600,000 shares, which brings our total shares up to 660,000. All right, so all of these shares got sort of shrunk a little bit, so the total number of them that controls the company, the total number has gone up by 10%, so each share is about 10% smaller than it used to be. And so we've got 660,000 shares now. And that lasts until May 1st, so March and April, so that's 2/12. Then, next thing on May 1st, we reacquired 100,000 shares of treasury stock, so that's going to bring our shares down by 100. So our shares are now 560,000. And May 1st to June 1st, so that's 1/12. June 1st, we had a stock split, and that's a 3-for-1 stock split. So we're going to multiply our 560 by 3, and we get 1,680,000. So all of the shares that were outstanding are now triple what they are now a third of what they used to be, so there are 3 times more. So there's a 3-for-1 stock split. And that goes until October 1st. So June, July, August, September, 4/12. And then on October 1st, we reissued the treasury shares, and that goes to 12/31. So it's going to be plus 60,000. And so that's going to bring us up to 1,740,000. And 10, 11, 12, that's 3/12. So add up our numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep, so we have 12 twelfths in our year, so we've gotten all of our months accounted for. So let's look at restatement. So everything, if you look at our two restatement events, everything that we have prior to June 1st has to be restated by 3, because everything prior to June 1st was subject to the 3-for-1 stock split. The things that happened after June 1st, all of those shares have already been split, so those changes, the 60,000 Treasury shares, those have already been subject to the stock split, so we don't have to do anything with those. And then everything prior to March 1st, so this is our everything prior to this date, is subject to the 10% stock dividend. So we're going to multiply it by 1.1 to increase it by 10%. You don't want to multiply it by just 0.1 because that'll shrink the number. You actually want to increase the number of shares. So, but everything after here has already been subject to the stock dividend, and everything after here is subject to the split. So, here's what we need to do. We need to walk through each of these line by line. We're going to take our 480,000, multiply it by 1.1, multiply it by 3, divide it by 12, or multiply it by 1/12, and that gets us 132,000 shares. Or 600,000 times 1.1 times 3, multiply by 1/12, because that was 1 month's worth, 165K. 660 times 3 times 2/12 is 330,000. 560 times 3 times 1/12 is 140,000. 1,680,000. Don't have to increase that because this has already been subject to the stock split and the dividend. So 1,680,000 times 4/12 is 560,000. 560, okay. And 1,740,000 for the last 3 months of the year is 435K. And so if you add all these up, you get 1,762,000 shares. All right? So this is our WANSO that is adjusted for the 10% stock dividend and the 3-for-1 stock split. So everything prior to those events gets adjusted upward. All right, so now we have done WANSO for a simple example with no stock dividends or splits, and now we've also done one with stock dividends and splits. And so now what we, by the way, my two little tricks, so we do have 12 months, we already looked at that. When we talked about is your average going to be in the middle, in this case, if you have stocks and dividends, or stock splits and dividends, you can't really do the is my average in the middle trick because all these guys got increased by relatively large numbers, including multiplied by 3. So your 1,762,000 is not in the middle of these. In fact, it's larger than all of these. But that's okay because these guys all got increased upwards, and that isn't accounted for if you just look at the raw number of shares outstanding.